seats or what?
See, Bob's gone today too, right? Are we? Okay. Oh, well, I can see it. It made an impression.
Yeah, apparently.
Okay, well, let's start with a roll call.
Bell,
Here.
Curran,
Here.
Freeling, present, Harrison, Hinkleman, Majerick,
Here.
Ott, Pitchford,
Here.
Ballrat,
Here.
Werfel,
Here.
Yarborough, Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 present, 3 absent.
Okay, thank you. Minutes from 2 weeks ago,
I'll make that motion, we accept it.
moved by Majerick. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Pitchford. If there's no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. Are we doing requisitions now or later?
We can do them now. If anybody has any questions, I don't have a list with me yet, but I'm gonna get Mark going and then I will go get it.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions about the requisition? Perfect, thank you.
All right, we've had some stuff to do with roads. Mark, you want to get us up to speed?
Absolutely. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mark Heiliger, the Director of the Lake Department. I'm here to brief you on. Sorry. I'm here to brief you this morning on the culvert failure that occurred on Point of Woods Drive yesterday on or about 12:30 in the afternoon. The culvert completely failed. For those of you not familiar, let me orient you to the map. So at the bottom picture below, the circle is around the affected area. To the north, you have Point of Woods Golf Course. To the right, you have, to the east is Roslyn Road, and to the south is Territorial Road. So this occurred in Benton Township. All right. So let me take you through the pictures first. So this is what happened. So during the storms yesterday, where we got approximately 5.5 inches of rain, the culvert on Point of Woods failed, taking the road with it. All right, so the picture in the upper right is from the Yellow Creek level view, looking north back towards the golf course. As you can see, the guardrail is the only thing hanging on either side of the road. The picture to your bottom left is the street view facing west, going down. So this resulted in 18 to 25 foot gap in the road. Additionally, these are also pictures from the stream view, both west and east. So as you can see, there's no way around. So let me take you back to the original slide. So our actions were to immediately close the road. There are at least 6 in total road close signs at varying degrees on both sides of the road at different points. And yellow caution tape is placed from guardrail to guardrail on each side at both to in attempt to warn pedestrians not to go there, because some of that asphalt is perched with nothing under it. All right, we notified the gas company that the gas line has been exposed that was buried alongside the road. They were on site conducting their evaluation and placing in a clamp, for lack of a better word, a clamp that will close the gas line if it indeed were to break. So we immediately also contacted Eagle. We expect to have them on site no later than Friday. All right, to appropriately size the replacement culvert. All right, and also identify any requirements they may have for removing soil and debris from Yellow Creek downstream, which at that point, I'll take you back to this picture. So it's kind of difficult to see at the size we are projecting at, but the yellow arrows are pointing to a sandbar that resulted from all of that material washing into the creek. We expect to be required to remove that. All right, so this affects about approximately 15 houses that are on the west side of Point of Woods Drive. And there is an easement in place at the end of Point of Woods Drive, and we worked with the golf course to create a temporary route of passage for those residents to be able to move through the easement, through a path on the golf course and out through their parking lot and subsequent drive and connect to Roslyn Road. Crews right now are putting some slag on the easement part, so to limit the damage to that area. We've also contacted the garbage company. All right, and we are working with the golf course to be able to put a dumpster for the residents that are affected on the west side of the road to be able to take their trash to the dumpster and dump it off, because there's no way to get a trash truck back there. We are also we will be working today to set up temporary mailboxes at the end of Point of Woods Road for those residents, and we're contacting the postmaster and letting them know to be able to, so they'll be able to receive their mail without having to travel to the post office. At this point, what are your questions?
What time of day or night did this fail, and did it fail all on its own because of the rush of the water?
We believe that it did. It happened at lunchtime.
So there was
12:30 p.m. I'm sorry. I still default to military time. So yes, 12:30 p.m.
okay.
You're welcome.
Number one, thank you for everything that you did on this. Thank you for giving me a call yesterday and updating me on this extremely quickly. That was great. Is there any way to know any other areas in the county during storms that might be vulnerable like this? Do we have any way of knowing?
So currently we have, we just approved a contract with, the committees just approved a contract with Whiteman to go through the county and identify all of the culverts, of which there are hundreds, and grade them so that we have a list that we can work off by priority.
And then getting the postmaster in to get temporary mailboxes, different routes for trash, those are all policies in the road department when stuff like this happens? Or is this something that you're just like on the fly, hey, I need to make sure that this is constant?
It is non-policy. We are working to take care of the residents that are cut off from their residences because of this occurrence.
Do you think that there should be policies specifically if something like this happened about like who to contact, get the postmaster and to get temporary mailboxes, different routes for trash?
I think it's something we could certainly look into, but the problem is if you craft a policy, it generally narrows how you deal with it. It can limit it could potentially limit our options, but we at the road department are always working to be flexible and agile in responding to events like this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ma'am.
Mark, thank you to you and your staff for handling this quickly. When do you sort of see this being remedied and possibly having a fix in place outside of the easement? Do you guys know what the scope and the timeline might be?
I think I'll defer to the engineer for a timeline. We expect the cost of the culvert only to be in the ballpark of $300,000.
Sure.
Timeline.
So right now we're dealing with trying to get a culvert in there. Like Mark said, Eagle will be down today to help size that. We have made contact with the two biggest precast concrete box culvert manufacturers in the state. One thought they had one that was plenty big enough, but realized it was sold last year. Right now, the other one is working with its Ohio division, trying to see if they have one in their yard, ready to go.
Sure.
Even though it's built to Ohio DOT standards, it's still same concept to MDOT, has to hold a semi.
Yeah.
So, there's no issue there, so we should hear back from them, this morning. If we have one in stock that we can have delivered, we're looking about a month to get it in place. If we have to have it built, 2 to
And
3.
okay. And the one that was there was elliptical, the one we're looking at going to is precast.
Yeah, so the one that was
Concrete
there
box.
was, what was there was a 3x5 elliptical box, or elliptical culvert metal, so 5 feet wide, 3 feet tall, approximately 65 feet long. What happened is, we didn't see a lot of rain. I mean, we've seen more rain than this before. The problem with this rain is it came in about 45 minutes. So it maxed everything out. So what happened is there was a small crack along the edge of the curb up top in the asphalt, probably about an inch wide crack that allowed water through. That water came rushing down that hill, went down that crack and liquefied the sand underneath it. And the water pressure around the culvert liquefied the sand around the culvert to the point where it just became like beach sand. Down the stream it went. We still cannot see the culvert. We believe the culvert's still in place, just buried. So there's a lot of trees in the way that stop it from going downstream, and we don't see it yet. So we're hoping the water went down as it was going down yesterday. But we're right now, our biggest thing is to secure it. So we're looking at a couple weeks just to secure it. And then once we can get the box can be set rather quickly. So.
Thank you.
Question?
Communications with residents that are affected. How would residents know all the things that are being put in place so that they could be able to access the temporary mailboxes? And
So we have one point of contact in there with the HOA, that residents making contact with all of them. Part of logistics today, is getting to each one of those residents, getting a formal contact, with a phone number, email, whatever possible. We have not worked with EOC yet. We are trying to get our new system set up where we can force messages to those addresses. If we can't get ours set up fast enough, I'm not sure if we're able to, but the next step is to work with EOC to see if they could force a message to those residents on that street through cell phone. So we are trying to open lines of communication right now. They know how to get in and out. The biggest problem right now is emergency services. We're meeting with Benton Township Fire again out there today to pre-plan. How are we going to get services back there, because a fire truck will not fit down. So that is our next step.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Warren?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Warren Parrish, your Equalization Director. 2023 is kind of a weird year from an assessing point of view. Because of that, Brian asked me to put together a brief presentation kind of discussing some of that weirdness, and particularly how it affects assessments and taxes. Some of these topics aren't going to be new to a lot of you. I've actually shared some of this already, but this is a topic that's easily often misunderstood, and I think part of the idea was that it would be a good idea to basically start at the beginning and just try to push out good public understanding about what's going on and be transparent about how this works. So bear with me as I take you through a walk down equalization lane. I'm going to be talking about first some terms, some common annual changes, give some examples of those changes, explain how property taxes work very briefly, and then what that means in 2023. The terms I want to talk about, at least in this presentation, are your true cash value, assessed value, county equalized value, state equalized value, cap value, and taxable value. Probably recognize these terms, heard them at one place or another, whether that's me or on your mail that you get from the township and so forth. But going down the list, true cash value. What we're talking about is the actual value of the property as indicated by the assessment roll, often referred to as market value. So what is my property worth? That's what we're talking about, your true cash value. In particular, according to the assessment roll. Assessed value equals half of true cash value. So for example, $100,000 property on the assessment roll will have an assessed value of $50,000. This is something that's determined by local units at their March Board of Review. The March Board of Reviews just wrapped up. We're getting reports. We've just finished getting reports from the local units. So that's the time of year. This is our annual calendar that we're following. The county equalized value, that's determined by you in April. It effectively trumps the assessed value, and assuming no unusual circumstances, it's usually the same number. The CEV will equal the AV. For the purpose of this presentation, just assume that they're the same. So you're going to be hearing from me again in a couple weeks when I finish putting together the annual equalization report, and that's going to have these numbers in it that you'll approve at that time. The state equalized value is just the next step up. That's determined in May by the State Tax Commission. It effectively trumps the county equalized value, and it's usually the same number again. So for the purposes of this, assessed value equals county equalized value equals state equalized value, just to simplify things. The other term I want to talk about is capped value. It limits taxable value, which I haven't talked about yet, but bear with me. It's determined by a mathematical formula, and as a result, it's not a subjective conclusion. So why I'm emphasizing that, your true cash value, your what is my property worth, that is a subjective determination. That's the assessor appraising your property and saying this is what I think it's worth. The capped value is math, and I'll talk more about that later. So it kind of operates in the background. We usually don't see capped value. What we actually see is the effect of the capped value, which is the taxable value, which is my next slide. Taxable value is important because this is ultimately what determines your taxes. Some unique properties about it are that A, it's driven by the capped value, but B, it cannot exceed the SEV, CEV, AV, etc. So those are the terms. Now, I'm going to give some examples. So like I mentioned previously, if you have a $100,000 property, on the left side of the assessment roll, I like to call it the left side, the valuation side, that's going to be $50,000, 50% of your cash value. The right side, which is the taxable side, the not subjective side, this is just an example number determined by a mathematical formula, your taxable value. Just as an example. Okay, so these are things that can happen from year to year, and these are all going to be relevant for why 2023 is unique. What we almost always see every year is market change. Not a surprise. The real estate market moves up and down. We all know that. Inflation. We all know about inflation. Capping of taxable value. I've already talked about that a little bit, but I'm going to give some examples down the road. Transfers of ownership or uncappings, and then new construction. So talking about each, your market change. So if real estate values are going up, you can expect to see an increase in your true cash value. Real estate markets are in flux. We've seen increases in the last several years. And again, it's going to be reflected in your true cash value, which is therefore reflected in your assessed value. This is the valuation side of the roll, the left side of the roll. Inflation. It's computed based on the Consumer Price Index. The State Tax Commission gives us something called an inflation rate multiplier every year. This gets used in a lot of our calculations, but in particular in this context, it is reflected in taxable value on the right side of the roll. Capping of taxable value is important because the left side of the roll in many situations is going to be higher than the right side of the roll. The assessed value is going to be higher than taxable value. And the reason for that is because of this capping effect. The inflationary effect on capped value limits the increase of taxable value to the rate of inflation each year. So if your property values are going up, your assessed value is going up, but your taxable value is only going up by the rate of inflation in most normal circumstances. And I'm going to illustrate this as we move forward. I want to do comment on this. So in an increasing market, it's common the taxable value will be less than assessed value because of that limitation. Transfers of ownership. These are important because these catch people by surprise all the time. In a year following a transfer of ownership, taxable value is set to equal assessed value. So like I just said in the past slide, typically your taxable value is less than your assessed value. But in the year following a transfer of ownership, it's going to uncap. That taxable value is going to come up. So in the year of an uncapping, the cap value does not apply to taxable value, and that can mean a significant increase in taxable value. And I will illustrate that in a minute. The other topic I want to talk about is new construction. Obviously, if you build a new house, that's going to raise your property value, therefore your true cash value, therefore your assessed value, but it's also going to increase your taxable value. Pretty logical. Okay, so your market change affects your assessed value. That's your left side. That's your subjective side. Your inflation affects the right side, your taxable value, what you pay taxes on. That's math. The capping of taxable value is a thing that happens, and I'll illustrate that. Transfers of ownership remove that cap for that year, and new construction means that both sides go up in value. All right, so to actually illustrate this in practice, we're going to talk about what does market change actually look like. So here we have in the first year, 2022, let's say our property is worth $100,000, so it's assessed at $50,000. The market change, say, this is just an example number, let's say it goes up $11,000. We see that reflected in the true cash value. We see that reflected in the assessed value. Pretty straightforward. And right now I'm only talking about the left side, which is why this is all blurred out. So this is just an example of what that looks like over time. You can see in 2015, this property was worth almost $70,000. And over time, that the market has increased, so the value goes up. The assessed value always is half of the true cash value. A side note, in a decreasing market, remember that taxable value can never exceed assessed value. So just in this example, if the assessed value happens to be 50,000 and the taxable value happens to be 49,000, and then the market actually goes down, and we're looking at now a 47,500 assessment, that number is less than this number. Therefore, the taxable value gets pulled down. So that's kind of a unique situation where normally the taxable value is kind of operating on its own. If the assessed value goes down low enough to bring the taxable down, that will happen. I'm trying to go through this quickly, but I'm sorry, bear with me. Give me the signal if I need to accelerate. Okay, so we've talked about market change and what that looks like. We've talked a little bit about inflation, what that looks like. Now I want to just illustrate it. So on the left side of the roll here, your valuation side, the market's increasing, right? So you're, just like I demonstrated before, your value goes up. But what happens to the value of your property from inflation? Well, in this context, nothing. Because inflation affects this side of the roll, the taxable side. So you're only getting the value increase due to inflation on your taxable. And that's important, and it's going to make more sense in a minute on this slide. This is probably the most important slide because this shows in 2015, my assessed value and my taxable value are really close to each other. They're basically the same number, right? But over the course of the next, I don't know, whatever, 10 years, you can see that the market's gone dramatically up. My assessed value has gone up every year as a result of that. But look what happened to my taxable value. My assessed value has gone up tens of thousands of dollars, but my taxable value is only going up a few $1,000s. The reason for that is the capped value. You're limited by inflation each year. So when your property values are going up, as a property owner, that's a good thing, right? Like your taxes aren't going up because your property values are going up. Your taxes are going up because of inflation. So that's equity in your pocket. So I really want to emphasize this because a lot of times there's concern about that, right? Like, oh, they're going to tax me more. My taxes are going up because my property values are going up. There's not a direct correlation between property value increases and taxable value increases. unless we're talking about a transfer of ownership. Exactly. So this is the exact same slide as before, right? Where my tax value is only going up by the rate of inflation. But let's say I sold the property in 2022. What's going to happen in 2023? That's going to jump up. My tax value is going to jump up to match my assessed value. So that's the only time, well, I don't want to say only time, but that's when the market actually has an effect on your taxable, is that when you purchase the property. And then, of course, the example of new construction, these numbers are the same as before, but I just added in the effect of you put on a new building, it's worth $50,000, that's 25,000 assessed, and you're also going to see that 25,000 on your taxable side. So that is another instance where tax value is affected besides inflation. All right, so how do property taxes actually work? Definitely going to oversimplify this, but there's two variables, your taxable value that we've already talked about, and then millage rates. What are millage rates? These are things that are determined by taxing unit boards. So you guys, townships, cities, libraries, schools. They're also determined by votes of the people. So you put a millage on the ballot, you're all familiar, I'm sure you've seen, should we raise the millage for roads to do this, whatever, in X township? It's a millage rate. It's really complicated. I'm not going to get too far into it, but just understand that the millage rates are things that exist because this is how you calculate a tax bill. So a tax bill is equal to the millage rate per $1,000 of taxable value of the property. So let's say we are dealing with 5 mills and I have a $50,000 taxable. So $50,000 divided by 1,000 equals 50. So 50 times 50 mills, you're looking at a $250 tax bill in this scenario. So very oversimplification, but just to understand that's how the taxes are calculated. All right, so what does this mean in 2023? So remember I was talking about the inflation rate multiplier. The state tax commission gives us this number, this IRM, and says this is what you have to use. It's based on the changes in the consumer price index. Well, this is what that has looked like historically, right? I went back 10 years. Nothing extraordinary about this. But here's what it looks like in 2023. 1.079. It's the highest it's ever been. So it stands out. What does that actually mean? Well, it has two major impacts. First impact is cap value that I've talked about, that the inflation rate affects taxable value changes. And it also affects your millage reduction calculations, which is something you're going to hear me talking about probably every single time you see me. So, as previously discussed, annual taxable value increases are limited to the rate of inflation. However, the law limits that increase to 5%. So in 2023, even though the inflation rate multiplier is basically 7.9%, the IRM is limited to 5. Yeah. This is the first time this has ever happened, by the way. So what does that look like? In this year, it's going to be 5% instead of 7%. Still a big jump. And then the other thing that it affects is your millage rollback. So the Headley Amendment requires an annual permanent reduction of millage rates under certain circumstances. Effectively, the millage rate, if a millage would result in more revenue adjusted for inflation, and that's key here, than a prior year, it must be reduced. And unlike the capped value, that inflationary allowance is not limited to 5% in the Headley rollback calculation. So to apply that inflation rate multiplier, the capped value gets 5%. And as a result, many properties are going to see a higher than normal increase in taxable value. For your Headley rollbacks, there's no limit to the inflationary allowance. So it's going to be the full 7.9% or whatever it was, I forgot. Meaning millage rates are less likely to roll back. What does that mean? Well, that means increased revenue for taxing units and higher taxes than normal for many property owners. I want to stress that there's hundreds of unique situations affecting each property, so that's by no means a blanket statement, but in a typical situation, in an increasing market, this is going to mean higher than normal taxes. And I did want to point out that this increased revenue is technically not increased revenue because it's inflation. So costs went up, revenue went up. It's kind of just how it works. It's not new dollars per se. That's my last slide. I'm happy to entertain questions. Thank you for bearing with me. I tried to go quickly.
John, and then Joe Quick.
So, piece of property sells and it sells for less than it was valued for.
Yeah.
So, how is it, the new cap value determined? So the cap comes off,
Yeah.
but to what level?
It comes off to the level that it was valued for on the assessment roll, because the sale price doesn't actually determine anything. The sale price is, I would characterize as one opinion of value. The opinion of value that's driving the assessment roll is the assessor's the assessor's appraisal, so the assessment roll.
So the roll does it, not the actual market. So the actual market's determined that the price of the property should be less. And you're saying that the assessor can come in and say that the market isn't accurate, it sold for that, but it should have sold for more.
Yes and no, because one sale is not a market. And that's the issue. If you buy a property for $100,000 and the assessor were to say, okay, you bought that property for $100,000, so I'm going to place a $100,000 valuation on it, they have now valued your property differently using different methods than every other property that hasn't sold. And that's not fair. So what the assessor is obligated to do is analyze the market, as in all of the sales that apply to a particular neighborhood, determine what rates are appropriate, and come up with a valuation based on an array of sales rather than just the one. And individual property owners are protected by the right of appeal. You can absolutely go in and say, look, I bought it for this price. I actually had an appraisal done that supports that value that I paid for it. And I believe that that's fair. And you can, whatever arguments you want to make, you can certainly make. But one sale is not a market. And that would be the explanation.
All right, Joe Quick.
Would it be appropriate for commissioners to get a copy of that presentation?
Did send that.
Okay, maybe I missed it.
I didn't see it either, so.
And then just a second follow-up, was there a picture of Mr. Headley anywhere in that presentation that I missed? Because I was really looking for it.
I should have snuck him in and I did not.
Okay.
Jim,
Warren, in the presentation you had for that 1 year when the property is sold, for that 1 year, 2023, you had it goes to 55,000 from the 36, but you said that's 1 year. What happens in 24? Does it stay at 55 or does it roll back to the 36?
So the following year, assuming it doesn't sell again and nothing other variables are going on, what would happen is kind of depends on the assessed value in that situation, because right now they're neck and neck, right? Your assessed value and your taxable value are the same thing. Assuming the market continues to increase, your assessed value is going to continue to go up. So that would allow for the inflationary effect on taxable value to apply in 2024. So theoretically, assuming the assessed value increases, the taxable value is going to increase by the rate of inflation, just like it normally. However, if the assessed value doesn't go up because the market isn't increasing, then it would be limited by whatever the assessed value is. But it would not go back down to the 36.
And if I heard you correctly, there's a cap on what the local assessor can raise that amount, correct?
Which amount is that?
The assessed value.
No, the assessed value is strictly half of true cash value. And true cash value is a subjective determination. That's an appraisal that's done using market data to say properties in this neighborhood are selling. It gets complicated in a hurry, and I'm happy to talk about it all day, but I don't know if you want me to.
thank you, Warren.
Well,
We're gonna need to wrap.
Okay, my point was that ever since Headley has passed, every time I have bought and sold a house, they use that sale as a means to raise my property taxes. And so that's why I'm trying to make the connection between what you pointed out there for 1 year but it's not 1 year, it's continuing after that.
Yeah, that'll
They use
start,
that as an opportunity to take from 36,000 to 55,000, and then it goes up from there. It never goes back to the 36.
correct, that'll
Okay.
set the
That was
baseline
my
basically going forward. The idea was that property taxes would no longer be tied to market changes, which can be dramatic. So when you purchase a property, the idea is I can afford the taxes at what it's currently valued at, and then going forward. That was the purpose behind proposal A.
Okay, thank you,
Excellent
Warren.
presentation. If you want more, his podcast starts at noon. We have about 2 minutes for Doug before we break for committees. Doug.
We'll make it brief and we will be gone. Okay.
It should work.
Perfect. Today, there's a resolution coming before you. It's F 2304169, requesting an amendment to the general fund budget. When we put the budget in place during the adoption process for the 2023 budget, we made a blanket statement, which basically said we didn't have ARPA funds built into the budget at that point in time, and we would amend at a later date. We're coming before you today asking to amend. I'm showing you here on the right-hand side. If you go clear over the right-hand side, we are asking to increase our revenues by 13.765 million. Expenditures, excluding transfers, of 952,000, and $12.5 million transfer out to capital projects fund. So I'm showing you here for illustrative purposes what those increases are related to. Lost revenue recognition is the greatest part of that. And we also have certain projects we need to occur for capital purposes. A question was brought up during the last conversation. Okay, what happens to the ARPA funds? I've tried to show you here, illustrate for you what is going on with the ARPA funds making up the $29.8 million. I'd be happy to answer your questions with regard to that at a later point. Capital projects fund, we are asking to increase the capital projects fund spending by somewhere in the area of $8 million. And the rest would remain within the fund balance at this point in time. I've tried to provide you here with a list of what projects were budgeted, what projects have rolled over from 2022, what projects for 2023 have not been budgeted, but we have gone out for bid and accepted bids, in essence. And we will be proceeding on that. And then what projects are yet to be determined, and we've allocated $5.4 million for that. That would change as, that number would change as we determine the cost of those additional projects. So being brief, be gone. I'm basically asking for you to adopt resolution F 2304169, amending the 2023 budget as presented.
Thank you. Finance Committee have anything to add?
We discussed this last week, and so we understand and we agreed.
Very good. Any questions? Ma'am?
The difference in the 12 million, the 9 million, that 12 million to move in and the 9, that $3 million difference is going to go into the surplus fund for future use, that identified?
The 12 million for, you mean in
From
the
ARPA
capital
that you wanna
projects?
Move over,
ARPA money is moving over to the general fund.
and you have 9 million assigned to capital.
I have $12 million assigned to the capital that's moving into the capital projects fund. Understand the ARPA money is coming in for continued operations. It's not necessarily designated as capital.
But that's where you're looking to spend it.
I can't necessarily say that specifically, but we are making resources available
So
for
the $3
capital
million
projects.
difference, where's it going?
It ends up in the fund balance in the capital projects fund.
Okay.
Good. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Doug. We'll go to public comments. We have no public comments. We'll go to other business. I'm reminded per diems are due today. Anyone have anything else before we break? Okay, well, then let's do committee business and